Welcome to Emerging Civil War News. I'm Chris Mikowski, and joining me from the great town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, is my friend Andrew Dalton of Gettysburg History. Andrew, how are you today?
Hey, Chris, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
And you have announced a really cool project this weekend that you guys are kind of taking the next step in your evolution to tell the story of Gettysburg. Tell us a little bit about the new Hopkins House initiative.
Right. So we are creating a Black History Museum in downtown Gettysburg, and it's a really remarkable story. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I guess, we were approached by some folks in the community about a structure that was deteriorating rapidly. There was a hoarding situation, and it had been condemned. And I was familiar with the house. I grew up here. I'm driven by it hundreds of times, and it's the home of Jack and Julia Hopkins. Now, Jack was the janitor of Gettysburg College at the time of the Civil War. His wife Julia raised three children in this home, and it was in such a state of disrepair that it was almost certain to be demolished. But we were able to discover in our research that it's the last standing structure in town from that period that was. Owned by and lived in by Black residents. And so it really is the last Black history landmark from the Civil War here in Gettysburg. So we were able to rally some support to purchase the house. And over the past 2.5 years, we've been slowly but surely working on exposing the house, getting the construction materials peeled away so we can see what's underneath and see what the bones of the original structure are like. And we were thrilled to discover the original logs that are still intact and salvageable. So we're going to be taking the structure and returning it to its Civil War era appearance, but also building onto it with some neat exhibits about Black history in Gettysburg.
Now, I'm just going to admit right up front, I'm an unabashed fanboy of what you guys have been able to do and the expansion you guys have done over the course of the last couple of years with the wonderful, remarkable museum that you guys have, taking over the house downtown where you guys are now able to tell the story of the civilians. And this just seems like the next step in that evolution of telling that fuller story beyond the battle, if I can use your own phrase.
Yeah. Well, we operate the Shriver House Museum on Baltimore Street, which is kind of an opposite end of the socioeconomic spectrum. The Shrivers were very well off. They had beautiful furniture, wallpaper, 4 stories of living space, an attic basement, and 2 stories. And this is the polar opposite of that. This is a small, rustic, rugged log cabin built by, folks who probably had no training in carpentry, and it was probably from materials borrowed from other structures that have been torn down, and they had very little. They worked from the bottom up to establish themselves. And Jack Hopkins' son Edward, who was raised in this house, actually went off, fought in the Civil War in the United States Colored Troops, then returned and became a local business owner, but also was elected the first. He was the first Black elected official in the town's history, and all of this happened, as he lived in this home for the rest of his life, where he was raised. It had been built onto a little bit later on, but it's just a remarkable story. And yeah, it's even goes beyond that. Edward Hopkins had two friends who served in the United States Colored Troops with him, and they were both living in the house with him after the Civil War. So you have three Black Civil War veterans living in this house at one time, one of which was wounded and captured and taken to Andersonville Prison and survived,
Oh,
which
wow.
is just a remarkable, remarkable story. So we have more than enough to talk about in this museum. It's going to be hard to pick the stories that we highlight, but we're going to use light and sound and immersive media technology to really bring to life this original cabin so that you can perhaps meet and maybe even have a conversation with the Hopkins family when you're in there. So it's a really unique project. I've all the things we're working on. I am just so excited about this, and I think it's going to add a lot to Gettysburg.
Now, at a press event on Saturday afternoon, you announced this initiative. Um, what's the next step as far as getting the public involved to help support this project?
Well, we're excited that the goal is $2 million, and we announced we've already reached the $1 million mark. So we are well on our way to finishing this project, but we want to start the work in the next month. So if you'd like to help us and chip in to get us to the $2 million goal, you can check out our website. It's gettysburghistory.org. And if you click the donate button, you'll see information about the Hopkins House. It's our top project at the moment. So if this sounds appealing to you, if you like historic house renovation and restoration. If you like Black history, if you like Gettysburg, any of those topics, the Civil War, we would certainly appreciate your support. Every little donation matters, and it gets us closer to where we need to be to open this up to the public.
I've had the chance to look at the house a little bit, thanks to your colleague Tim Smith, and yeah, obviously a lot of work needs to happen to make this a reality. To kind of go from this once condemned house into this multimedia immersive experience. Um,
Right.
as you look ahead to that project, anything particularly exciting about it to you? Aside from, I'm sure the whole thing, but any particular aspect about that?
Well, I love artifacts, so I'm excited to see what else we find as we are peeling back the layers. And we've already found probably more than 50, closer to 100 artifacts in the walls that have fallen down over the years into the interior of the wall, especially from the attic, which was built, I think, in the later 1860s. So we've already collected some items. We found some things in the backyard through some archaeological work, but I'm excited to see what we find. And I'm just excited to give people an experience that includes things like the Underground Railroad and slavery, and these topics that are very much related to the history of Gettysburg, but perhaps aren't always given the attention that they deserve because everything's focused on 3 days in July. Of course, we're still going to talk about the battle, but we want to talk about these other parts of the history and how they shaped the events of 1863. And the story in general of the Civil War veterans in this community. I think we have a list of over 100 Black Civil War veterans who have a tie to Gettysburg or Adams County, which is an extraordinary number given the size of the community here. And we want to tell some of those stories. Some were killed, some wounded, captured. Um, and many of them have pensions that we've been able to locate at the National Archives. And one of the pensions for this soldier who lived at the Hopkins House is 500 pages long, and it details his entire journey from slavery to freedom to the United States Colored Troops to the Hopkins House where he married his wife. And there's just so many things that we could use in the museum just from this one document. So paring it all down will be challenging, but I can't wait to see the response from visitors when they can they can listen to these words and hear these stories from a first person perspective.
Wow, you continue to do remarkable work. It's so impressive what you're adding to the story there, Andrew. I really appreciate it as a big fan. So thank you. One final pitch, if folks want to get involved, give them one final pitch.
Sure. Yep. Check it out, gettysburghistory.org. You can learn all about the project, a lot more than we just talked about, some history of the house. And, we're thrilled to launch this capital campaign already halfway toward our goal, but we do need help to get across the finish line. So if you go on gettysburghistory.org or check us out on YouTube, we'll be releasing a lot of content related to this over the coming months.
Fantastic. Best of luck to you, Andrew. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm Chris McCoskey for Emerging Civil War News. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.